Alright, wood finishers. So, I've switched up the camera angle a little bit. Hopefully you can see a nice raking light here bouncing into the camera. I have one coming in from the other direction as well, so I can have good visibility of this. A couple things. Number one, the size of the pad here, it doesn't really change depending on the size of the work surface. I have to be able to hold this thing comfortably in my hands. The size of this is going to determine how much material I put into this pad. And then the other thing is, I'm already starting to get some of this out. Not a whole lot to this on the initial steps. Just want to keep this thing moving because with French polishing it dries, or pardon me, with the shellac it dries so incredibly quickly that I need to start to be smart about what it is I'm doing. Alright, so the first round here is done. You'll notice that as I was doing this, I was making a circular pattern, which is kind of typical. And what I'm trying to do is build up layers with this technique, and I'm trying to do it slowly and methodically. So after I've distributed every part of the surface, now I need to start changing my pattern a little bit. Now I'm going to start doing figure eights and trying to be wise about where I'm applying this. Oops. Yeah. Alright, so those are two patterns. The other one that I can do is I want to work on the edges a little bit more consistently. I think the tendency is when you're applying French polish, overlapping here a lot in the center happens. So I need to spend a little more time or attention on these outside edges. Oops. And the beauty of shellac is that it will start to dissolve the first layer that you've put on, so I can reapply this and it starts to create a thicker and thicker and thicker coat. Same is true if this is sprayed on or polished on or brushed on, not brushed on, polished on with the way I'm doing it. So that's it. It's getting a little bit dry here, which is great. If I can pause long enough, this will fully dry and then I'll start to reapply another coat. French polishing does really well when you have full access to the entire surface. The first time I tried French polishing was a very long time ago, but it was on a relatively small box that had an inset lid. So I had the edges of the box extended up a little bit. And so every time I would run this across the edges, it would start to scrape a little bit of that finish in, and it just made for this really inconsistent area. So keeping that in mind as far as one of your finishing selection options. But it works very well when you can do it this way. Luthiers live and die by this technique. It really is an incredible way of creating a high sheen onto a really elegant piece. So anyway, universally loved. Last thing I will say before I start reapplying is that having an empty container to store your pad into with the lid on will not necessarily ensure that this stays wet or ready to use, but it won't fully dry and collect dust as it's drying. So it'll stay clean, and then you just recharge the pad for the next time you need to use this. So having a container for storing these things is probably a good idea. And if you are going to use different colors of shellac, it would be wise to have this container labeled. If you're just going to use blonde or garnet or whatever shellac you're using, make sure not to do this on a slick surface. Then just labeling each one of those containers. Alright, what you can't see is that it was starting to stick a little bit, that's why I was dragging around. So as I was rotating this, I was also squeezing to try to get more of this material out. All right. So I have more shellac should I need it. Also have alcohol for thinning this product a little bit if it's getting a little bit goopy and I need this to flow a little bit more. I've got alcohol. The last product that I'll have with French polishing is an oil. And so this is mineral oil, and this is not the best way to distribute this, but if I put just a couple of drops of mineral oil on this pad, there we go, the oil will help to distribute this stuff without allowing it to dry. And even though the oil is not chemically compatible with the shellac, it does its job to allow you to apply this, and then it's easy to remove afterwards. So you'll definitely need to have the oil available, and it just helps to make this stuff flow out much smoother and makes this finish successful. All right. I think in the process of this video I've applied 4 or 5 coats, which is great. The thinking with this is that you're going to build these things up. It's incredibly thin, but you'll do these multiple times, and in rotating this you can see that I have some swirl patterns there. Those will go away by introducing some alcohol to the next round, or a little bit of oil as well, and that will just help this thing to flow a little bit more and avoid me kind of starting and stopping as that pad grabs, and then you should have a pretty fantastic finish. I don't really know what a good number is here. It is dependent on the cut. You'll see that I've marked, this is a 2-pound cut. I think a 1-pound cut is probably a little bit better suited for French polishing because it's so much thinner. A 2-pound cut helps to build up the thickness much faster, but you can start to adjust that by just introducing a little bit more alcohol into your pad, and then that will thin out the product that you have in the pad. And anyway, it goes on much thinner, dries faster, and allows you to reapply, recoat. But always watch this, always check for any areas that you're not liking, not happy with. But the good news about all of this is that because this is an evaporative finish, we don't need to sand between coats. So the solvent will reactivate the layer underneath it, even though it's dried overnight or 4 months ago. And then you can start to build these things up. And again, one homogeneous coat is the goal here. And that will give incredibly great depth and clarity to the material, which is sometimes exactly what we want. Okay, I'll do more coats here, but don't want to take up your time to do that. Hopefully this is helpful, and let me know how your experience goes in the comments.